Hello, good morning! Kahapon, hindi tayo nakapagbasa ng maayos kasi parang 5 pages lang yung nabasa natin. So ngayon, we will try to break a habit na mabasa ko talaga within 1 hour yung isang libro bago ako mag-entertain ng yung papasok sa channel. Magbabasa dun sa mga messages para mas mabasa ko talaga ng maayos yung libro. Kasi kahapon 5 pages. Pero nag-enjoy talaga din ako sa usapan kahapon. With Chairuisem, yung si Boy Danlac, officials, at saka yung ano ko, si from Japan na si Annalyn Hamot. So, let's start habang maaga pa. Reactive people are also affected by their social environment, by the social weather. When people treat them well, they feel well. When people don't, they become defensive or protective. Reactive people build their emotional lives around the behavior of others, empowering the weaknesses of other people to control themselves. The ability to subordinate an impulse to a value is the essence of the proactive person. Reactive people are driven by feelings, by circumstances, by conditions, by their environment. Proactive people are driven by values, carefully thought about, selected and internalized values. So proactive people are still influenced by external stimuli, whether physical, social, or psychological, but their responses to the stimuli, conscious or unconscious, is a value-based choice or response. As Eleanor Roosevelt observed, no one can hurt you without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can hurt you without your consent. Without your consent. No one can hurt you without your consent. Tama nga. Sige, sige. Mhm. Ay. Thank you. Ano ba tayo? So, as Eleanor Roosevelt observed, no one can hurt you without your consent. In the words of Gang Hee, they cannot take away our self respect if we do not give it to them. Mm, Gang Hee. They cannot, they cannot, they cannot, they cannot take away
Makabang na siya titiwas.
mao, our self respect. They cannot take away our self respect if we do not give it to them. They cannot take away our self respect if we do not give it to them. It is our willing permission, our consent to what happens to us, that hurts us far more than what happens to us in the first place. I admit this is very hard to accept emotionally, especially if we have had years and years of explaining our misery in the name of circumstance or someone else's behavior. But until a person can say deeply and honestly, I am what I am today because of the choices I made yesterday, that person cannot say, I choose otherwise. I am what I am today because of the choices I made yesterday. Once in Sacramento, when I was speaking on the subject of proactivity, a woman in the audience stood up in the middle of my presentation and started talking excitedly. It was a large audience, and as a number of people turned to look at her, she suddenly became aware of what she was doing, grew embarrassed, and sat down back. But she seemed to find it difficult to restrain herself and started talking to the people around her. She seemed so happy. I could hardly wait for a break to find out what had happened. When it finally came, I immediately went to her and asked if she would be willing to share her experience. You just can't imagine what happened to me, she exclaimed. I'm a full time nurse to the most miserable, ungrateful man you can possibly imagine. Nothing I do is good enough for him. He never expresses appreciation. He hardly even acknowledges me. He constantly harps at me and finds fault with everything I do. This man has made my life miserable, and I often take my frustration out on my family. The other nurses feel the same way. We almost pray for his demise. And for you to have the gall to stand up there and suggest that nothing can hurt me, that no one can hurt me without my consent, and that I have chosen my own emotional life of being miserable. Well, there was just no way I could buy into that. But I keep thinking about it. I really went inside myself and began to ask, do I have the power to choose my response? When I finally realized that I do have the I when I finally realized that I do have that power, when I swallowed the bitter pill and realized that I have chosen to be miserable, I also realized that I could choose not to be miserable. At that moment, I stood up. I felt as though I was being let out of San Quentin. I wanted to yell to the whole world, I am free. I am let I am let out of prison. No longer am I going to be controlled by the treatment of some person. It's not what happens to us, but our response to what happens to us that hurts us. Of course, things can hurt us physically or economically and can cause sorrow. But our character, our basic identity does not have to be hurt at all. In fact, our most difficult experiences become the crucibles that forge our character and develop the internal powers, the freedom to handle difficult circumstances in the future, and to inspire others to do so as well. Crucibles. 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 Mhm. Mm. In fact, our most difficult experience becomes the crucibles. A crucible is a severe test or trial or an extremely challenging experience. This figurative sense of crucible is based on the literal meaning of the word, a heat resistance container used to melt metals. Hmm. So, in fact, our most difficult experiences become the crucible. Severe test and trial. Hmm. And forge. Make or shape by hitting it in a fire. Ang forge. Mo po ni siya ang kuwas. Forge. So mag-mold. So a test na nag-mold our character and develop the internal powers, the freedom to handle difficult circumstances in the future and to inspire others to do so as well. Frank is one of many who have been able to develop the personal freedom in difficult circumstances to lift and inspire others. The autobiographical accounts of Vietnam prisoners of war provide additional persuasive testimony of the transforming power of such personal freedom and the effect of the responsible use of that freedom on the prison culture and on the prisoners, both then and now. We have all known individuals in very difficult circumstances, perhaps with a terminal illness or a severe physical handicap, who can maintain magnificent emotional strength. How inspired we are by their integrity. Nothing has a greater, longer lasting impression upon another person than the awareness that someone has transcended suffering, has transcended circumstance, and is embodying and expressing a value that inspires and ennobles and live lives. Ennobles. 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 Give. Give someone a noble rank or title, huh? And is embodying and expressing a value that inspires, ennobles, and lives life. One of the most inspiring times Sandra and I had have ever had took place over a 4-year period with a dear friend of ours named Carol, who had a wasting cancer disease. She had been one of Sandra's bridesmaid, and they had been best friends for over 25 years. When Carl was in the very last stages of the disease, Sandra spent time at her bedside, helping her write her personal history. She returned from those protracted and difficult sessions almost transfixed by admiration for her friend's courage in her desire to write special messages to, to be given to her children at different stages in their lives. Protracted, 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 protracted. She returned from those protracted, lasting for a long time or longer than expected or usual, and difficult sessions almost transfixed by admiration for her friend's courage in her desire to write special messages to be given to her children at different stages in their lives. Carol would take as little pain-killing medicine as possible so that she had full access to her mental and emotional faculties. Then she would whisper into a tape recorder or to Sandra directly as she took notes. Carol was so proactive, so brave. Hoy, Joy! Joy! Kana na akuan o Joy, oy.
Ano, abrihan natin.
Kailang.
Ay, paghila na hata, mapilit ka.
Sir, kita aling.
Kay,
Sobarato.
sobra ko gani.
Sobarato lang siya.
Yo. Kaya gano, kami ni Ryan, kami niya sa agriculture sa una dito sa Nancy.
Wala dyan siya wawin.
Mga ni mga bukado.
Asa ka na ang kuan?
Napa? Isa pa isip, wala siguro niyang kuan. Kain tayo ng avocado. Mamaya, tag 35 lang. Inog na yung avocado na, gwapo na.
Oh, bako na na, kay hilog na. Di ka magpahilog.
Uy, lagi ka na bukado na eh. Sir, mga Agustin and avocado.
Mlay! Onya na ni mo kuhaon? Ah! Isa ko na ako bayad, Joy. Pagkuhan sa sa bugas. Bilang uno?
Oo, no.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh.
Tama.
Wala ka pa rin.
Asa pa do? Okay. Yun na, nakoy kukunat na.
Kung saan sa ka namubura na siya.
O, mapupura yun ay. Kukunat. Mangustini, o.
Wag mo na din ang pagkita.
Okay ko na. Nandang?
Ay, kanina na.
O, sabi naman to. Hindi siya makakuha daw iring. Hindi niya
Ang
nakuha.
ganito siya.
Oo. Kuya pa.
Ito lang ang ihapon ko. Oh, wait, padala.
Mangustin. Ang dinisa. Mangga.
Duha man ka mangustin. Di ba duha ka mangustin?
Welcome to the family.
Diyon na ako sa nabili. Tanawa mo sa anak. Wapo na hindi ang paayo.
Break muna ha. Wait lang.
Mas gwapo pa Malaysia, Ching.
Ang isa durian.
Mas gwapo pa ni siya yung mga palit kong tatao. Mandarin, Ching.
Nay durian no.
Oh,
Asang durian
siya.
ana?
Ayan, durian.
So muna ang durian. So ang
Ayan,
isa
mangga.
dili ang isa ana is kuan.
Ayan, sulis.
Mangustin ang isa, mangustin, durian ang isa. Avocado ang isa nay.
Avocado, tama.
So bumili kami ng 5.
Ano, kagwapo, ano yung pagkakuana?
Hmm.
Wala pa
5 na ano. So Limang drafted na puno ng durian, mangustin, mangga, coconut, and avocado. Maliit lang siya, hindi na siya lalaki na kasi drafted na siya. Naka-draft na siya. So, okay, balik tayo. Ito. Carol would take a little pain-killing medication as possible so that she had full access to her mental and emotional faculties. Then she would whisper into a tape recorder or to Sandra directly as she took notes. Carol was so proactive, so brave, and so concerned about others that she became an innermost source of inspiration to many people around her.
Tanawa ba? O, magluwa na tanawa ang gihato ni Juan ni video.
Asa?
Sabot tayo.
Oo. Kana?
150.
Asa na ang kuha niya?
Duha na ka mangustin.
Ay, simple man siguro na mangustin. Dili man kuhan.
Ha?
Dili man.
Marcot.
Marapot.
Dako bang puluan?
Hindi mo na yan. Kuha na siya. Sumpay.
Sigurado ni siyang durian.
Sumpay din na
Ang
siya.
mangga.
Asa man ang gisumpay? Huwag mo gisumpay ang mangga.
Enormous.
Oo.
Very large.
Mubura ko na kayo. Basta kang milay. O ba nas milay na kasun? Milay di sa jawbe.
Enormous. Carol was so proactive, so brave, and so concerned about others that she became an enormous source,
Balik mo to si Baby.
possibility or in a very large in size, quantity, or extent, of inspiration to the many people around her. I'll never forget the experience of looking deeply into Carol's eyes the day before she passed away and sensing out that deep, hollowed agony a person and tremendous intrinsic worth. I could see in her eyes a life of character, contribution, in service as well as love and concern and appreciation. Many times over the years, I have asked groups of people how many have ever experienced being in the presence of a dying individual who had a magnificent attitude and communicated love and compassion and served in unmatchable ways to the very end. Usually, about one-fourth of the audience respond in the affirmative. I then ask how many of them will never forget these individuals, how many were transformed, at least temporarily, by the inspiration of such courage, and were deeply moved and motivated to more noble acts of service and compassion. The same people respond again, almost inevitably. Viktor Frankl suggests that there are three central values in life: the experiential, or that which happens to us, the creative, or that which we bring into existence, and the attitudinal, or our response in difficult circumstances such as terminal illness. Three central values in life: experiential, Experiential. So experiential is the first one. That which happens to us. And then creative. Creative. So first is experiential, creative, and attitudinal. Experiential, creative, and attitudinal, or our response in difficult circumstances such as terminal illness. My own experience with people confirms the point Frank makes that the highest of the three values is attitudinal in the paradigm of reframing sense. In other words, what matters most is how we respond to what we experience in life. Difficult circumstances often create paradigm shifts, whole new frames of reference by which people see the world and themselves and others in it, in what life is asking of them. Their larger perspective reflects the attitudinal values that lift and inspired us all. Taking the initiative. So, our basic nature is to act and not to be acted upon, as well as enabling us to choose our response to particular circumstances. This empowers us to create circumstances. Taking initiative does not mean being pushy. Taking initiative does not mean being pushy, obnoxious, or aggressive. It does mean recognizing our responsibility to make things happen. Over the years, I have frequently counseled people who wanted better jobs to show more initiative, to take interest in aptitude tests, to study the industry, even the specific problems the organizations they are interested in are facing, and then to develop an effective presentation showing how their abilities can help solve the organization's problem. It's called solution selling and is a key paradigm in business success. Over the years, I have frequently counseled people who wanted better jobs to show more initiative, to take interest in aptitude tests, to study the industry, even the specific problems the organizations they are interested in are facing, and then to develop an effective presentation showing how their abilities can help solve the organization's problem. It's called solution selling and is a key paradigm in business success. The response is usually agreement. Most people can see how powerfully such an approach would affect their opportunities for employment or advancement, but many of them failed to take the necessary steps, the initiative, to make it happen. I don't know where to go to take the interest in aptitude test. How do I study industry and organizational problems? No one wants to help me. I don't have any idea how to make an effective presentation. Many people wait for something to happen or someone to take care of them. But people who end up with the good jobs are the proactive ones who are solutions to problems, not problems themselves, who seize the initiative to do whatever is necessary, consistent with correct principles, to get the job done. Whenever someone in our family, even one of the younger children, takes an irresponsible position and waits for someone else to make things happen or provide a solution, we tell them, use your R and I, resourcefulness and initiative. In fact, often before we can see it, they answer their own complaints. I know, use my R and I. Responsible and resourcefulness and initiative. Use your R and I. Holding people to the responsible course is not demeaning, it is affirming. Proactivity is part of human nature, and although the proactive muscles may be dormant, they are there. By respecting the proactive nature of other people, we provide them with at least one clear, undistorted reflection from the social media. May nag-pump na remember ko tuloy yung pinsan ko, si Hazel. Kasama siya kahapon nag-join sa YouTube channel ko. Hey Lugaw! Good morning! So, holding people to the responsible course is not demeaning, it is affirming. Proactivity is part of human nature, and although the proactive muscles may be dormant, they are there. By respecting the proactive nature of the other people, we provide them with at least one clear, undistorted reflection from the social mirror. Of course, the maturity level of the individual has to be taken into account. We can't expect high creative cooperation from those who are deep into emotional dependence. But we can at least affirm their basic nature and create an atmosphere where people can seize opportunities and solve problems in an increasingly self reliant way. Act or be acted upon. The difference between people who exercise initiative and those who don't is literally the difference between night and day. I'm not talking about a 25 to 50% difference in effectiveness. I'm talking about a 5,000 plus percent difference, particularly if they are smart, aware, and sensitive to others. It takes to create the PPC balance of effectiveness in your life. It takes initiative to develop the 7 habits. As you study the other 6 habits, you will see that each depends on the development of your proactive muscles. Each puts the responsibility on you to act. If you wait to be acted upon, you will be acted upon. And growth and opportunity consequences attend either road. At one time, hello, Kachaw! Good morning! Thank you sa pag-visit. At one time, I worked with a group of people in the home improvement industry, representatives from 20 different organizations who meet quarterly to share their numbers and problems in an inhibited way. This was during a time of heavy recession, and the negative impact on this particular industry was even heavier than on the economy in general. These people were fairly discouraged as we began. Mayong buntag din silingan. Kahapon 5 pages lang yung nabasa ko. Kaya ngayon, inaano ko, trinatry ko na within 1 hour, magbabasa muna ako ng libro. Tapos, then doon ako mag-aano. Time, break, ganyan. Usap-usap doon sa mga pumasok. Musta sa wag mo kalimutan ha, yung order ni Emily, yung fresh lumpia. Ang sarap talaga dyan, naubos namin agad. Sabi ni nanay, ay, ang sarap. Saman, photocopy sa. Sunitanan.
Ano lang ni kay di pa ta kagawas.
Kalingawan magpahid.
Nawa na lang niya kay di pa ta kagawas, kulong ng tapirong ni. Ano pa? Kugid. Wala mga senior, magkuhan na lang, pintura. Kalinawan na lang. May sobra mga pintura.
Sila.
Utso. Haraan. Jan, ikaw dyan nagluto ato dyan o si Tilor na? Nami pagkatimpla dyan. Ganahan kay kusa ka na iyahang ang lumpia niya ba? Mag-order ko ato dyan sa August 7. Ha? Sa imuhang lumpia. Mga pila kaya na duha no tulo. Sa lumpia nay. Sa birthday ni tatay.
Kita-kita naman.
Gani. Tulo no? Pa-reserve ko dyan ha, August 7, tulo. Sa i-note ni mo. Birthday yung po na ni Inday ba? Balik ko basa. At one time, I worked with a group of people in the home improvement industry. Representatives from 20 different organizations who meet quarterly. Oh, siya dyan nagluto na eh. Sa YouTube daw na ba ni mo nakuha ingon si nanay? Tulo ayaw ko kalimti ha. Organization who meet quarterly to share their numbers and problems in an inhibited way. This was during a time of heavy recession, and the negative impact on this particular industry was even heavier than on the economy in general. These people were fairly discouraged as we began. The first day, our discussion question was, sa daong ko ra daw niya anay. Ayos. Sa daong ko. The first day, our discussion question was, what's happening to us? What's the stimulus? Many things were happening. The environmental pressures were powerful. There was widespread, nagkatawa po siya na yun. There was widespread unemployment, and many of these people were laying off friends just to maintain the viability of their enterprises. By the end of the day, everyone was even more discouraged. The second day, we addressed the question, what's going to happen in the future? We studied environmental trends with the underlying reactive assumption that those things would create their future. By the end of the second day, we were even more depressed. Things were going to get worse before they got better, and everyone knew it. So on the third day, we decided to focus on the proactive question, what is our response? What are we going to do? How can we exercise initiative in this situation? In the morning, we talk about managing and reducing cost. In the afternoon, we discuss increasing market share. We brainstorm both areas, then concentrated on several very practical, very doable things. A new spirit of excitement, hope, and proactive awareness concluded the meetings. At the very end of the third day, we summarized the result of the conference in a three-part answer to the question, how's the business? Part 1. What's happening to us is not good, and the trends suggest that it will get worse before it gets better. Part 2. But what we are causing to happen is very good, for we are better managing and reducing our costs and increasing our market share. In part 3, therefore, business is better than ever. Now, what would a reacted mind say to that? Oh, come on, face facts. You can only carry this positive thinking and self-psych approach so far. Sooner or later, you have to face reality. But that's the difference between positive thinking and proactivity. We did face reality. We faced the reality of the current circumstance and of future projections. But we also faced the reality that we had the power to choose a positive response to those circumstances and projections. Not facing reality would have been to accept the idea that what's happening in our environment had to determine us. Businesses, community groups, organizations of every kind, including families, can be proactive. They can combine the creativity and resourcefulness of proactive individuals to create a proactive culture within the organization. The organization does not have to be at the mercy of the environment. It can take the initiative to accomplish the shared values and purposes of the individuals involved. Listening to our language. Because our attitudes and behaviors flow out of our paradigms, if we use our self awareness to examine them, we can often see in them the nature of our underlying maps. Our language, for example, is a very real indicator of the degree to which we see ourselves as proactive people. The language of reactive people absolves them of responsibility. That's me. That's just the way I am. I am determined. There's nothing I can do about it. He makes me so bad. I'm not responsible. My emotional life is governed by something outside my control. I can't do that. I just don't have the time. Something outside something outside me, limited time is controlling me. If only my wife were more patient. Someone else's behavior is limiting my effectiveness. I have to do it. Circumstances or other people are forcing me to do what I do. I'm not free to choose my own actions. So reactive language versus proactive language. Clear ba siya? So, kung reactive language, there's nothing I can do. Pero kung proactive language, let's look at our alternatives. So, tingnan natin kung ano yung maaano natin. Reactive language, that's just the way I am. Ganito na talaga ako. Ang proactive language, I can choose a different approach. So, pwede nating hanapan ng panibagong approach, panibagong solusyon. He makes me so bad. Lagot ko siya. Nagagalit ako sa kanya. Ayan. He makes me so bad. He makes me so bad. He makes me so mad. He makes me. I control my own feelings. Pwede ko siyang control. Pwede kong makontrol yung sarili. They won't allow that. Hindi nila hayaan. I can create an effective presentation. Reactive language, I have to do that. Proactive language, I will choose an appropriate response. Reactive language, I can't. Ang proactive language is I choose. Ang reactive language, I must. Ang proactive language is I prefer. Ang reactive language is if only. Ang reactive language is if only. Ang proactive language is I will. Clear ba siya? The language comes from a basic paradigms of determinism. And the whole spirit of it is the transfer of responsibility. I am not responsible, not able to choose my response. One time, a student asked me, "Will you excuse me from class? I have to go on a tennis trip." "You have to go or you choose to go?" I asked. "I really have to," he exclaimed. "What will happen if you don't?" "Why, they'll kick me off the team." "How would you like that consequence?" "I wouldn't." In other words, you choose to go because you want the consequences of staying on the team. What will happen if you miss my class? I don't know. Think hard. What do you think would be the natural consequence of not coming to class? You wouldn't kick me out, would you? That would be a social consequence. That would be artificial. If you don't participate on the tennis team, you don't play. That's natural. But if you don't come to class, what would be the natural consequence? I guess I'll miss the learning. That's right. So you have to weigh that consequence against the other consequence and make a choice. Weigh that consequence against the other consequence and make a choice. That's right. So you have to weigh that consequence against the other consequence and make a choice. I know if it were me, I'd choose to go on the tennis trip, but never say you have to do anything. I choose to go on the tennis trip, he meekly replied. And miss my class? I replied in a mock disbelief. A serious problem with reactive language is that it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. People become reinforced in the paradigm that they are determined, and they produce evidence to support the belief. They feel increasingly victimized and out of control, not in charge of their life or their destiny. They blame outside forces, other people, circumstances, even the stars for their own situation. At one seminar where I was speaking on the concept of proactivity, a man came up and said, Stephen, I like what you're saying, but every situation is so different. Look at my marriage. I'm really worried. My wife and I just don't have the same feelings for each other we used to have. I guess I just don't love her anymore, and she doesn't love me. What can I do? The feeling isn't there anymore? I asked. That's right, he reaffirmed. And we have three children we're really concerned about. What do you suggest? Love her, I replied. I told you, the feeling just isn't there anymore. Love her. You don't understand. The feeling of love just isn't there. Then love her. If the feeling isn't there, that's a good reason to love her. But how do you love when you don't love? My friend, love is a verb. Mm, love is a verb. Love is a verb. Love is a verb. Love, the feeling is a fruit of love, the verb. So love her, serve her, sacrifice, listen to her, empathize, appreciate, affirm her. Are you willing to do that? In the great literature of all progressive societies, love is a verb. Reactive people make it a feeling. They're driven by feelings. Hollywood has generally scripted us to believe that we are not responsible, that we are a product of our feelings. But the Hollywood but Hollywood shit but the Hollywood script does not describe the reality. If our feelings control our action, it is because we have abdicated our responsibility and empowered them to do so.
Ilang keratin?
Eight. Proactive people make love a verb. Love is something you do, the sacrifices you make, the giving of self, like a mother bringing a newborn into the world. If you want to study love, study those who sacrifice for others, even for even for people who offend or do not love in return. If you are a parent, Look at the love you have for the children you sacrifice for. Love is a value that is actualized through loving actions. Proactive people subordinate feelings. Proactive people subordinate feelings to values. Love, the feeling, can be recaptured. Love is a birth. So, we are into 81. So, pwede na tayo kung may papasok. Pwede tayong mag-usap-usap. Pero sa ngayon, parang walang pumapasok sa channel. So, tutuloy tayo sa pagbabasa. We are on our page 81. Ito mo yung gawin. Sa labas is no concern, and then sa loob is circle of concern. Circle of concern, circle of influence. Another excellent way to become more self-aware regarding our own degree of proactivity is to look at where we focus our time and energy. We each have a wide range of concern: our health, our children, our problems at work, the national debt, nuclear war. We could separate those from things in which we have no particular mental or emotional involvement by creating a circle of concern. Circle of concern. So, circle of concern, circle of influence. This is the second picture. Circle of concern and circle of influence. As we look at those things within our circle of concern, it becomes apparent that there are some things over which we have no real control, in others that we can do something about. We could identify those concerns in the latter group by circumscribing them within a smaller circle of influence. By determining which of these two circles is the focus of most of our time and energy, we can discover much about the degree of our proactivity.
Oh, isa man.
Ay, nakapalit, nakabrush na eh.
Napalit na ko, hati na pa ako naman. Ikaw
Sir,
tulog pa.
circle, and page 83 is circle of concern, circle of influence.
Pwede ko nito tutuloy mo, pwede ko ba lang gagmay lang ko, purma lang ko dito kay pag mapurma natin.
So at first, yung tatanggalin yung no, hindi naman natin concern. Then, ipapasok yung circle of concern. Kung ano yung mga concern sa within sa sarili. Then, sa circle of concern, ipapasok ang circle of influence. So within the circle of influence, yun yung three, is a proactive focus. Mhm. Excuse me. Proactive focus, positive energy, enlarge the circle of influence. Proactive people focus their efforts in the circle of influence. They work on the things they can do something about. The nature of their energy is positive, enlarging and magnifying, causing their circle of influence to increase. Reactive people, on the other hand, focus their efforts in the circle of concern. They focus on the weakness of other people, the problems in the environment, and circumstances over which they have no control. Their focus results in blaming and accusing attitudes, reactive language, and increased feelings of victimization. The negative energy generated by that focus, combined with neglect in areas they could do something about, causes their circle of influence to shrink. So yung kanina is proactive view and then is the reactive focus.
Dala ayaw pagkuha sa balon ha.
Reactive focus, negative energy reduce the circle of influence. As long as we are working in our circle of concern, we empower the things within it to control us. We aren't taking the proactive initiative necessary to effect positive change. Earlier, I shared with you the story of my son who was having serious problems in school. Sandra and I were deeply concerned about his apparent weaknesses and about the way other people were treating him. But those things were in our circle of concern. As long as we focus our efforts on those things, we accomplish nothing except to increase our own feelings of inadequacy and helplessness and to reinforce our son's dependence. It was only when we went to work in our circle of influence, when we focus our own paradigms, that we began to create a positive energy that changed ourselves and eventually influenced our son as well. By working on ourselves, instead of worrying about conditions, we were able to influence the condition because the position, wealth, rule, or relationship, there are some circumstances in which a person's circle of influence is larger than his or her circle of concern. Circle of influence and circle of concern.
Oo. Back to back na lang ako tanawa.
Excuse
Kaya
me.
dito siya ay no. Mo sahi gyud kuan. Iwasan ko to baka man ito sa kuan. Ako na nang palibutan din ng kuan naman siya.
This situation reflects a self-inflicted emotional myopia, another reactive selfish lifestyle focused in the circle of concern. Though they may have to prioritize the use of their influence, proactive people have a circle of concern that is at least as big as their circle of influence, accepting the responsibility to use their influence effectively. Hmm? Come on. Neri, ma'am, no?
Oh, Neri mo. Parang hindi ka sa pila-pila dito na lang. Ano?
Ma'am, cellphone number, ma'am, 09.
997 mo.
Ah, ha? Sir, 997 5041 761.
Ano ko nang bato ko na ito sa sukli. Ipon. Ipon na. Bato. Ipon na lang ang sa ilalim na lang ang may ice.
Hangit na dito siya ang kuan.
Ang pasulat na lang ko din sa ano, tapos pa-sign.
Saan ka man? Ngalan?
Oo. One 40.
O, dito ibutang. Ikuan testing na ko kung tama na ba.
Thousand 40.
Nang magbayad sa tubig. Karoon ka na ko ikuha. Kanang, ang gawin ako pag-ingon.
Eight.
Eh, sila na lang. So, sila na lang ako dito kakit sa ilaha.
Ma'am,
Ya, kasi isira.
Uyuran! Para di likod.
direct, indirect, and no control. The problems we face fall in one of three areas: direct, control, problems involving our own behavior; indirect control, problems involving other people's behavior; or no control, problems we can do nothing about, such as our past or situational realities. The proactive approach puts the first step in the solution of all three kinds of problems within our present circle of influence. Direct control problems are solved by working on our habits. They are obviously within our circle of influence. These are the private victories of habits 1, 2, and 3. In direct control, problems are solved by changing our methods of influence. These are the public victories of habits 4, 5, and 6. I have personally identified over 30 separate methods of human influence. As separate as empathy is from confrontation, as separate as example is from persuasion. Most people have only three or four of these methods in their repertoire. Reper, repertoire, repertoire, in their repertoire. Reper, wala na eh. A stack of plays, dances, or pieces that a company or performer knows or is prepared to perform. Methods. This four of these methods in their presentations, stack body of the are going perform. Stack of skills or type of behavior that a person habitually uses. Mm, Stack of skills or types of behavior that most people have only three or four of these methods in their repertoire, starting o starting usually with repertoire, repertoire, tour, tour. These are the public. Most people have only three or four of these methods in their repertoire, starting usually with reasoning, and if that doesn't work, or moving to flight or fight. How liberating it is to accept the idea that I can learn new methods of human influence instead of constantly trying to use old ineffective methods to shape up someone else. No control. Problems involve taking the responsibility to change the line of the button on our face, to smile, to genuinely and peacefully accept these problems, and learn to live with them, even though we don't like them. In this way, we do not empower this problem to control us. We share in the spirit embodied in the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer. Lord, give me the courage to change the things which can and ought to be changed, the serenity to accept the things we cannot be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yung ang ganda talaga ng ano nito, na prayer na to. Lord, give me courage.
Dito sa inyo, wala dahil si Ate dito sa inyo. Wala man dito eh.
Give me the courage. Lord, give me the courage to change the things, to change the things which can and ought to be changed. The serenity to accept the things which cannot be changed. And the wisdom to know the difference. Lord, give me the courage to change the things which can and ought to be changed, the serenity to accept the things which cannot be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference. Whether a problem is direct, indirect, or no control, we have in our hands the first step to the solution. Changing our habits, changing our methods of influence, and changing the way we see our no control problems are all within our circle of influence. Circle of concern is ang direct. Circle of influence is indirect. And no concern. Expanding the circle of influence, it is inspiring to realize that in choosing our response to circumstance, we powerfully affect our circumstance. When we change our part of the chemical formula, we change the nature of the result. I worked with one organization for several years that was headed by a very dynamic person. He could read trends. He was creative, talented, capable, and brilliant, and everyone knew it, but he had a very dictatorial style of management. He tended to treat people like gophers, as if they didn't have any judgment. Gophers. Gophers. A person who runs errands, especially on the movie set or in office. Okay. Frank's Lib, he tended to treat people like gophers, as if they didn't have any judgment. His manner of speaking to those who work in the organization was, go for this, go for that, now do this, now do that. I'll make the decision. The net the net effect was that he alienated almost the entire executive team surrounding him. They would gather in the corridors and complain to each other about him. Their discussion was all very sophisticated, very articulate, as if they were trying to help the situation. But they did it endlessly, absolving themselves of responsibility in the name of the president's weakness. You can't imagine what happened this time. Someone would say, the other day he went into my department. I had everything all laid out. But he came in and gave totally different signals. Everything I've done for months was shut just like that. I don't know how I'm supposed to keep working for him. How long will it be how long will it be until he retires? He's only 59. Someone else would respond, do you think you can survive for 6 more years? I don't know. He's the kind of person they probably won't retire anymore. But one of the executives was proactive. He was driven by values, not feelings. He took the initiative, he anticipated, he empathized, he read the situation. He was not blind to the president's weaknesses, but instead of criticizing them, he would compensate to them for them. Where the president was weak in his style, he'll try to buffer his own people and make such weaknesses irrelevant. And he'd work with the president's strength, his vision, talent, creativity. This man focused on his circle of influence. He was treated like a gopher also, but he would do more than what was expected. He anticipated the president's need. He read with empathy the president's underlying concern. So when he presented information, he also gave his analysis and his recommendations based on that analysis. As I sat one day with the president in the advisory capacity, he said, Stephen, I just can't believe what this man has done. He's not only given me the information I requested, but he's provided additional information. That's exactly what we needed. He even gave me his analysis of it in terms of my deepest concerns and a list of his recommendations. The recommendations are consistent with the analysis, and the analysis is consistent with the data. He's remarkable. What a relief not to have to worry about his part of the business. At the meeting, it was go for this and go for that to all the executives. But one, to this man, it was, what's your opinion? The circle of influence has grown. This caused quite a stir in the organization. The reactive minds in the executive corridors began shooting their vindictive ammunition at these proactive men. It's the nature of reactive people to absolve themselves of responsibility. It's so much safer to say, I am not responsible. If I say I am responsible, I might have to say I am irresponsible. It would be very hard for me to say that I have the power to choose.
Na ako na yung maghulaman ni Loloy na walang subversible.
Mm.
Kurang pa no, para malimpihan na niya. Tapos dito sa
It was very hard for me to say that I have the power to choose my response, and that the response I have chosen has resulted in my involvement in a negative, collusive environment, especially if for years I have absolved myself of responsibility for results in the name of someone else's weakness. So these executives focus on finding more information, more ammunition, more evidence as to why they weren't responsible. But this man was proactive toward them, too. Little by little, his circle of influence toward them grew also. It continued to expand to the extent that eventually no one made any significant moves in the organization without that man's involvement and approval, including the president. But the president did not feel threatened because this man's strength complemented his strength and compensated for his weaknesses. So he had the strength of two people, a complementary team. This man's success was not dependent on his circumstances. Many people were in the same situation. It was his chosen response to those circumstances, his focus on his circle of influence, that made the difference. There are some people who interpret proactive to mean pushy, aggressive, or insensitive, but that isn't the case at all. Proactive people aren't pushy, they're smart, they're value driven, they read reality, and they know what's needed. Look at Ganghi. While his accusers were in the legislative chambers criticizing him because he wouldn't join in the circle of concern, rhetoric condemning the British Empire for their subjugations of the Indian people. Ganghi was out in the rice paddies, quietly, slowly, and perceptibly expanding his circle of influence with the field laborers. A groundswell of support, of trust, or confidence followed him through the countryside. Though he held no office or political position, through compassion, courage, fasting, and moral persuasion, he eventually brought England to its knees. breaking political dominions of 300 million people with the power of his greatly expanded circle of influence. So we're done with the page 88. So page 40. Page 60 supposed to be. In page 80. Nice. Nakaabot tayo ng page 80. Let's see. Tapusin natin para matapos natin yung proactive. Yung first habit. Be proactive. The haves and the bees. The one way to determine which circle are concerned is distinguish between the hubs and the bees. The circle of concern is filled with the hubs. I'll be happy when I have my house paid off. If only I had a boss who wasn't such a dictator. If only I had a more patient husband. If I had more obedient kids. If I had my degree. If I could just have more time to myself. The circle of influence is filled with the bees. Mhm. I can be more patient, be wise, be loving. It's the character focus. Anytime we think the problem is out there, that thought is the problem. We empower what's out there to control us. The change paradigm is outside in. What's out there has to change before we can change. Mm. The proactive approach is to change from the inside out, to be different, and by being different, to effect positive change in what's out there. I can be more resourceful, I can be more diligent, I can be more creative, I can be more cooperative. The proactive approach is to change from the inside out, to be different and by being different, to effect positive change in what's out there. I can be more resourceful, I can be more diligent, I can be more creative, I can be more cooperative. One of my favorite stories is one in the Old Testament, part of the fundamental fabric of the Judeo Christian tradition. It's the story of Joseph, who was sold into slavery in Egypt by his brothers at the age of 17. Can you imagine how easy it would have been for him to languish in self pity as a servant of Potiphar, to focus on the weaknesses of his brothers, in his capture, in on all he didn't have? But Joseph was proactive. He worked on B, and within a short period of time, he was running Potiphar's household. He was in charge of all that Potiphar had because the trust was so high. Then the day came when Joseph was caught in a difficult situation and refused to compromise his integrity. As a result, he was unjustly imprisoned for 13 years. But again, he was proactive. He worked on the inner circle, on being instead of having, and soon he was running the prison and eventually the entire nation of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh. I know this idea is a dramatic paradigm shift for many people. It is so much easier to blame other people, conditioning, or conditions for our own stagnant situation. But we are responsible to control our lives and to powerfully influence our circumstances by working on being, on what we are. If I have a problem in my marriage, what do I really gain by continually confessing my wife's sins? by saying I'm not responsible. I make myself a powerless victim. I immobilize myself in a negative situation. I also diminish my ability to influence her. My nagging, accusing, critical attitude only makes her feel validated in her own weakness. My criticism is worse than the conduct I want to correct. My ability to positively impact the situation withers and dies. So, yung muharam, smart, 09 65 55 15 539. 0965 15539. Ah, ah. Ara. Ha? 25. Ay, okay. Ha? Sa Cobra, wala pa. 23. Ah. So sa ngayon, tatapusin natin yung pagbabasa kasi kakain na kami. So, dito lang muna tayo sa page 90. Konting-konti na lang matatapos natin yung proactive. Habit number 1. Ilang pages na lang. So, thank you. And please do subscribe my channel. Bye-bye. Have a nice day, everyone.